Hello, and welcome to Midwest GameFest Online 2022. My name is Beth. I am here with Jeff Stevens from Jeff Stevens Games. Say hello.
Hello, Beth, and hello, everyone watching and listening. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, of course. Before we get too far into it, I wanted to let everyone know who's watching on Twitch that this is an interactive interview. So if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the chat and I will make sure they do not get missed. But now, without further ado, Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am Jeff Stevens, Midwest. I live in Jefferson City, Missouri, so I'm not too far from you all. Excuse me. I started my gaming career probably with the basic rules in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. The hard books, the newest hard books that came out at the time, were just amazing. And then I played through college. In 1994, I sold all my RPG stuff, thinking that I was going into business and didn't have time for gaming anymore. And sadly, I missed out on a bunch of stuff. I did play Magic the Gathering, though, during that time in between. So that was a lot of fun. But then I sold all my cards with that, too. I lost a lot of dual lands to eBay buyers. But then about, what was it, 2015, I think it was, my brother came to me and said, you know, I've got some guys that are wanting to play D&D again at work, and do you want to join? Thought about it for a little bit. I'm like, you know, it was fun then. I'll jump back in the game. And we played. I played a half-orc ranger. This was at the end of the 4th edition was there 4.5, or I can't remember what that was, right before 5e started. And so when that campaign ended, we started 5e, and then I started to DM. I had never DM'd before. I'd always been a player. But I based my campaigns off of Metallica and Primus songs. So my whole campaign was, based off of all these Metallica song titles because they're just so inspiring.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Master of Puppets, Battery, Harbinger of Sorrow, and just all kinds of different titles. And after that, I found the DMs Guild, and I'm looking through some of the stuff on the Dungeon Masters Guild, and I'm like, well, I could at least do this well, converting my notes and my maps to something usable by another Dungeon Master. And so I published my first adventure in 2016. June of 2016 was the House of the Midnight Violet, and it didn't sell nearly as well as I thought it was going to. I thought, I'm going to publish this adventure to the Dungeon Masters Guild. I'm going to have 100 sales on day one, 1,000 sales in the month. No, it does not happen like that normally. It's a trickle-in business, especially at that time where people didn't really know what the Dungeon Masters Guild was. And from then, I kept creating. I fell in love with the creation process, and then eventually I became a producer, falling in love with working with other writers, ordering art from artists, finding artists, cartographers, editors. And so now, not only do I write my own adventures, but I also work as a production person in the background, dealing with other RPG creators to create cool products. And the pinnacle of that was when I did my Kickstarter for Adventures from the Potbellied Kobold about in 2020, I think it was. Brought in a whole bunch of art writers for that, like James Introcaso, MT Black, Sean Merwin, Hannah Rose. I really wanted to bring in good writers that had written 5e. And then I worked with a slew of artists and cartographers, and just really, I think, made a really great book of 15 short adventures that any DM can basically just drop into their campaign.
All right. So we already have a couple of questions from chat. So we're going to go from Chili Draws. Have you played other TTRPGs, and have they influenced any of your game designs?
So when I was in junior high and high school, we played a lot of tabletop RPGs. I played Gamma World, which is probably my second favorite. My second favorite RPG. I would love to see a revisit of that. I think you could reuse the 5e rules with that setting. Somebody said, well, why don't you just create a setting like that? I'm like, it's not Gamma World, I want that title.
Right.
So if Wizards ever wants to sell that license, I'll jump in and try, but I don't know if I'll get it. But yeah, that post-apocalyptic scene was just so great, and at the time, we had like movies like The Day After and Damnation Alley, and there was a lot of that nuclear holocaust type feel going on at that time. I've played Champions. I've played the old Star Wars RPG. I've played I've played so many I can't remember. Twilight 2000. I've played some Cthulhu, and so yes, a lot of aspects of those games probably do make it into my writing. It's just I'm so focused on 5e right now because that is that's the go-to game right now for a lot of new gamers.
Oh, absolutely. So from DD's D&D, say that 10 times fast. When you dream up new projects, what is your process to decide what to release?
That's tough. So I have a lot of I was making a note yesterday of how many projects I currently have in the work. I have about 10 or 11 projects currently in the works that I've started and then maybe put aside and started working on something else. It's like the squirrel reference when you're a dog and you see a squirrel, it's like squirrel, something flashing,
Yes.
I want to start that project, and then I put something away, or I got stuck on something. I'm like, well, I'll just set that aside for a while. So probably the biggest decision factor there is how easy is it to complete. Can I use stock art? Can I use stock maps? Can I do I need an editor? Do I need to order art? So the quickest ones are the ones where you say, no, I don't need to order art. I can use a stock map. I can draw my own map. Um, but then there's some that just kind of grab you and grasp you, and you want to put that artwork into it, and you want to put the extra money into it. And
Right.
I'm at a point where in my career that I can do that. I have like a steady income of revenue from the Dungeon Masters Guild where I can count on, okay, I'm going to make this much in a month or this much in a month, and then I can kind of think ahead and say, okay, well, if I order art, I can pay for it in 2 months, so I'll just order 2 months
Right.
out of art. A lot of new creators don't have that option. They don't have that back catalog to where they're constantly seeing a revenue stream to do that. So I feel lucky in that regard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You talked a little bit about art there, so I kind of want to latch onto that because I'm really interested in the art requesting process. How
Okay.
does that kind of work for you?
So a lot of times I will find artists on Twitter, on Facebook, and then I will reach out to that artist, ask their rates, and if those rates are within my budget, I'm like, okay, well, let's work on something. And a lot of times I will go over my art budget because I want more and more art.
Fair.
And finding a good artist that is receptive to feedback, that is meets their deadlines, that is happy to work with you, is fantastic. And once I find that, I create a relationship with that person and try and do more projects with them. Um, because sometimes it's just like a new writer. It's really difficult to know, is this artist going to come through for me at the end when I need something?
Right.
Is this going to be the work that I desire? And I've been lucky that I've hardly had any issues with that with artists. Most of the artists that I work with are fantastic. Like for the Madhouse or the Happy Freak Show collection art, some of the black and white interior sketches are by Luis Prado, fantastic to work with. A new project I'm working on called Horror at Devil's Run is a lot of the internal art is by Dean Spencer and another artist, Matt Morrow, who's done fantastic work with the commissions that I requested from Matt. And then Saga McKenzie did the cartography for that. And Saga's really great to work with also. So yeah, it's really about just talking, and I think you can get an idea of just when you're conversing with that artist how they're going to work with you. If they're really engaged in asking questions and what your requirements are, that's really good. And I'd love to be able to talk back and forth with artists.
Yeah, I was gonna say, has there ever been something that you've seen either from an artist's Instagram or their Twitter account, and you're like, this is inspiring a module, or this is inspiring an encounter. I need this.
Yeah.
Does that ever happen?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of Dean Spencer has a lot of stock art on Drive-Thru RPG. He'll
Mm-hmm.
produce art and put it up on our Drive-Thru RPG, and you can purchase it and get the license and use it in the product. And a lot of his art has inspired so many of my NPCs that I've written for some of my Villains and Layers books. And also his art is all featured in my Kickstarter that just finished last year and is fulfilling in a couple months. Potbellied Kobold's Guide to Villains and Layers. It's all about villains and how you can use them as NPCs, and each one has a Dean Spencer image that inspired the writers for the project.
I know it's right behind you. Could you show us the cover for that? Because the artwork for the cover for that is so good.
For the Potbellied Kobold?
Yes, Potbelly Kobold. It is amazing.
This is the Adventures from the Potbellied Kobold, which was 2 years
Yes.
ago. It's available on Drive-Thru RPG and Amazon and several virtual tabletops. Roll20 conversion is due to be completed by the end of this month. But yeah, this one was quite an adventure. The cover is by Peter Penev.
So good.
He's from overseas. He did a lot of some of the more of the interior art, where we actually have the Potbellied Kobold herself.
Oh, I love it.
And so she goes through and she acts as a quest giver or a mini adventure giver. The adventurers find her. She says, "Well, I've heard that this is happening, or I need this," And Potbellied Kobold is actually a cursed gnome wizard. her evil rival cursed her to be a kobold, and so some of these adventures actually, the characters find things that she needs to end the curse and revert her back to Crystal Tingletoe, her gnome wizard stuff. But yeah, some of the art, like that piece.
I love weapon art.
Oh, I do too. I'm hopefully working on a book of weapons very soon.
Ooh, definitely keep a lookout for that, because that's amazing. Oh, that's
MT
so
Black's
good.
Clockwork Adventure, Clump Spindles,
Nice.
Clockwork Conundrum, the map there. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to work with artists and see what you've written actually transferred or created into something you can actually see, you know?
Oh.
And for them to get it right is amazing.
Yeah, so we actually had a comment or a question from chat from Shadow Tool. Do you work with artist agents, or do you normally work with the artist directly?
Typically just with the artist directly. That's most of the time what you'll find on Twitter and Facebook is the artist themselves is just promoting their work, saying, hey, this is a commission I just did, this is a commission I just did, or this is something I did for fun, you know. And if it's inspiring and I see it, I'm like, okay, let's see what this is going to cost if they have time to do this. And sometimes the costs are out of my range. That's okay. I'm not going to try and, you know, reduce their price or ask for a reduced price, because that's what they command. That's the art. They could be that busy to where they don't need smaller pieces. They just want the large pieces. Right. So that's okay. I find the people that I can work with.
Absolutely. We had a couple more questions from chat. From DD's D&D, what's your favorite actual play moment you've had in your games?
There was... So this is from an adventure that I actually have on the DM's Guild. It's called Into the Belly of the Beast. And so I ran this for my home game. And there is a part in there where there is a gnome who is lost within this swamp. And you find a sending stone in a hag's house, and the other sending stone the gnome has. So the two gnome friends had sending stones. One got lost in the swamp and was taken by the hag, and the sending stone was there, and the other gnome still had the sending stone. So the player character who picked up the sending stone started talking into it. Well, on the other end was the gnome who I was playing, and just started bantering back and forth between these two sending stones, which aren't supposed to work that way, but I made them like walkie-talkies, you know. And
yeah, of course.
Just the conversation we had was just so fun, and the rest of the table was like, that's the best part of the night right there. Just listening to that banter back and forth. And it's just the role play, you know, combat's all right. You know, it's fun. It's fun to use your characters to hack and slash or defeat the enemy, but role play and character engagement is really the thing that I strive for in adventure writing and in my own games that I run.
Awesome. So we had another question from Chili Draws. What's your favorite thing that you've created for 5e, or something that you're especially proud of? It's like picking a favorite child.
Yeah, it is. Now, okay, so the game I'm running tomorrow, The Night of the Rise, is probably one of my favorite adventures to run. The one I ran yesterday, The Lair of Glaucus, was a lot of fun to run. It was a lot of fun to write. But The Night of the Rise can go so many different ways. It can go all combat. It can go no combat at all. It's all up to the players and characters and what they decide to do. And that one is just a little bit different, I think, and people really seem to like it when they run it. So that's probably my favorite piece that I've individually written. Now there's other pieces like Madhouse of Tasha's Kiss, there's my Villains and Lairs projects, my Savage Encounters projects, that just see the end product is just so amazing after the art and the writing's all complete. But probably The Night of the Rise, I'm going to say, is my favorite piece that I've ever written. Now that was one of my first products, so it's not as clean as some of my more polished stuff now that I've had 5 years in the industry.
Would you ever go back and do like a revised version?
I've actually started that, yes. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Because there's things that I
so
noticed when I came in to doing this. I'll be honest here. I had very little experience with women gamers or transgender gamers or the LGBTQ community. And so a lot of references in that module are bandits or guys. You know, all the bandits in the modules are written as guys because that was just how we played back when I played, and my eyes had not yet been opened. And so I'm trying to go back. I want to revisit that and say, you know, the guys and gals instead of the boys over there, you know, and, you know, just kind of make it, I don't know, more up to date, you know, with today's current RPG gamer and consumer.
Right. As somebody who has been gaming since I was 15, representation absolutely does matter. So it's kind of cool that you're going back and looking at that. But I think that's also kind of a fun thing to do, is go back and say, you know, this is my favorite thing I've done. Let's update it and make it even better. So that's really cool. We had another question from DD's D&D, and this is more from a perspective of a player. What's your favorite character that you've ever played?
Wow. So I really engaged with Warfist, my Goliath fighter cleric, and I spoke about Warfist yesterday with during the game, the Laird Glaucus. Now he was a Goliath. He loved sausages. He had to have his sausages. Everywhere he went, he asked about the sausages that were in town. And he was just this big, huge Goliath cleric fighter. He had a huge warhammer. He wore a bandolier of sausages. So instead of daggers or anything else, he had a bandolier that was just a sausage in each ring of the bandolier. And he would walk around like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger would with a cigar like this, you know. And it was a sausage instead. I just really connected with that character and just loved doing the voice because it was like a, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger type feel, and that's what he was. He was big and strong, and he ate the sausages, and he would always say, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. Would you like a sausage?" You know, and he would offer sausages to people.
That's so funny. Although I imagine after a few months of travel, those sausages get a little
oh no, they're cured. They're smoked. They're cured. They're fine. Yeah, just like a aged cigar and aged sausage is just as good.
Fair enough. Oh, that's funny. So, got another question from Rob Kraft. Are there monsters or classes or other content WotC doesn't allow you to use when creating content?
So on the Dungeon Masters Guild, you can use anything that WotC, you can use all their IP. Anything that's licensed to be used on the Dungeon Masters Guild. So now we can't use some of the older stuff like Dark Sun, that kind of stuff, but you can reskin those characters and monsters if you call them something else. But yeah, like Mind Flayers, Elithids, Beholders, Displacer Beasts, all that kind of stuff, which you could not normally use outside of the Dungeon Masters Guild, and knowing like products you're going to sell on Drive-Thru RPG, Amazon, all those, Roll20, all those are available to use when publishing on the Dungeon Masters Guild. And it comes with a price, because when publishing on the Dungeon Masters Guild, you lose 50% of the price right off the bat. So if I sell something for $5, I'm only going to make $2.50 off of it. And that's if I'm not splitting royalties, with maybe an editor, an artist, a cartographer, which you can do on those platforms. But, you know, in contrast, if you put something, and once you do that, once you publish something on Dungeon Masters Guild, you cannot publish it anywhere else. That is theirs. It's still your property, but under their license, you can't put it anywhere else. So, conversely, if you publish on Drive-Thru RPG, you're limited to the monsters you can use. Basically, the monsters listed in the SRD and OGL. But Cobalt Press also has their creature codex and their other monster books that they brought out, which they include an open game license for you to use in your other products. So you can use Cobalt Press products monsters and NPCs in your own products, as long as they don't break their own IP rules. Publishing on DriveThruRPG means that if you are an exclusive publisher, you retain 70% of the sale price. So, if I'm selling something for $10, I'm going to make $7. Conversely, if I'm selling on the Dungeon Master Guild for $10, I'm going to make $5. So you gain $2 worth of profit there. Now, there's a big choice when you do that, because you do not see the same kind of 5e sales on DriveThruRPG as you do the Dungeon Master's Guild. That has been my experience, and I think others have had the same experience. The Dungeon Master's Guild is where a lot of people have gravitated to find third-party 5e content, whereas with DriveThruRPG, you're fighting against bigger players, like Cobalt Press, and another one is Mike Shea, Sly Flourish, and his Lazy DM guides. MT Black started putting products on DriveThruRPG, which MT is a great writer and producer of stuff. So yeah, it's harder to make an impact on DriveThruRPG, but then again, DM's Guild is becoming so populated with creators that even there it's become difficult to actually make a quick impact when you post something there.
Right. So how do you create content that sort of stands out?
Yeah, that's always a great question, because I've thought I have created some content that really stood out and it didn't.
Right.
But a beautiful cover, an intriguing title, and it needs to be something that GMs and players want. And knowing what that is often lucky.
Yeah.
Because
kind of about finding modern trends, right?
Yeah, exactly. I may create a subclass, which I think is amazing, and my test players think is amazing, but when it's put out there, nobody else buys it because no one's looking for that kind of subclass. I may create an adventure, which I think is really cool, but nobody wants it because nobody wants to go traveling through a swamp. It's all you can probably do research and figure out what are people looking for right now. Typically, if you are producing for the DM's Guild and you produce something that is tied to the current books, the current releases, you're going to do well. Like Strixhaven. I'm not sure if the Tal'Dorei stuff will be available. What's the new one that's coming out soon? Call of the Wild, or I can't remember what it's called. I'm not sure if that'll be available for DM's Guild writers to write for, but yeah, most of the time, if you're writing or creating products for current books, then that's going to do fairly well.
Yeah, that's kind of makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a couple more questions from chat. From Stila Bauer. Without any restrictions, so we don't have to worry about licensing, what setting would you love to use in any game format?
I mean, I'd go back to Gamma World.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I just think that post-apocalyptic feel was just so much fun with the mutations and the mutants and all the. I mean, in our game, we came across old vehicles that we would then beef up with machine guns or whatever we could find, and make big tanks out of them, and just a lot of role play to that. I think that's the answer for me.
I don't disagree. It is, to me, there was a lot you could do now that would be really interesting, so let's hold out for a new license on that.
I think if that could be converted using 5e, I think that would be a pretty good hit.
Especially in the convention scene. Now, you may disagree, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I love 5e for the convention scene. I think it's something very easy to pick up, and I think Gamma World would be very eye-catching, especially when we're all trying to get right back into convention.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion when a new company releases that they've got the IP or the license to produce a new product, like say Doctor Who. I think when that was brought out that they're going to use 5e for the rule set, a lot of people said, well, that's not cool. You should write your own rule set. 5e is, there's so many people playing 5e that it's becoming the rule set that if you want to just drop in a new setting or a new game, that's the one to go with, because most people already know the basic rules of it. You may have setting rules that are different, like with Game World, you have weapons or more shooting weapons, but to know that you've got advantage and disadvantage, your character abilities, using all that same stuff to just kind of build off that. I think you shoot yourself in the foot if you created something that didn't use those rules, because everybody who plays 5e will be like, hey, let's try this one out, rather than I don't have time to learn a new rule set. Because if people are playing online, we've got this resurgence in the old time players, who I'm going to call myself that because I'm 50 years old. We've got those players coming back into the game. They don't have time to learn new rules. And if you're playing online, I don't have time to learn a new game if I'm only getting to play once a week, and I'm writing other stuff, and I've got a full-time job and all that kind of stuff. So it just makes it easier, I think, for people to jump into a setting if they're using the 5e current rules.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. Shadow Tool in chat said that's what D20 system was in early 2000s. And you could also make parallels to the Apocalypse World engine, right? You have this base rule set, and then you kind of modify it to fit all these different settings. And I think there is definitely an advantage to using the D&D 5e rule set.
Yeah.
So we have, let's see, one more question from Chili Draws. Are you able to recycle work you've previously created in the DM's Guild back into a larger project, as long as it stays on the DM's Guild?
You can reuse projects. So, like, say if I have an adventure and it's on the DM's Guild, and I want to create a book of a collaboration of adventures, I can use that product again in a DM's Guild product, but I can't use the adventure in any other product outside the DM's Guild. So once it's on the DM's Guild, all references to it or publishing of it has to stay on the Dungeon Masters Guild. It's like I did the Freak Show collection. It started out with Madhouse Natasha's Kiss, and then Brimley and I did Happy Jack's Funhouse, and then we did Annalise's Revenge. And those have all sold really well. They've been very popular. I went to a laid-out artist, and I converted all of them into one book. So when you buy the Freak Show collection, you get all three of the Freak Show adventures, and that's a separate product, but it's still, the individual products are also available on the Dungeon Masters Guild too.
Honestly, as I was flipping through a lot of those products, that one is one that it immediately went into my cart. Can you tell me a little bit about taking those adventures and putting them all together in one book? How much rewriting did you have to do?
We didn't have to do much at all, because when Brimley and I wrote those, now Brimley Farr is an amazing writer. He is my inspiration for, when I read some of his early work, I cannot remember the titles, I'm sorry, but he's got some really weird titles, but his writing is amazing. The story that he tells within those writings were amazing. So when I thought about the Madhouse Tasha's Kiss, I knew Rimley's style, and I knew that he was really into horror and that kind of thing. And so he and I worked on the Madhouse Tasha's Kiss, and we collaborated, and he wrote sections, and I reworded some stuff, and then filtered it, and then stitched it all together, and just to make this really cool product. But there's a lot of RP in that, which I think is why it's so popular. But then that was the first adventure, and so with Happy Jack's Funhouse, we left them all loosely connected. So it's like, well, Happy Jack knew Tasha's Kiss, or there's a portal between the two, and so we just kind of let them be loose. It's not like a railroady type thing. You can drop one in now and drop one in later, and the characters find the connection to them later. So it wasn't that hard to make them into one project. And I've got a great layout artist who worked on that. Alan Tucker put that together for me, and just did a great job of that too. So yeah, it wasn't hard to do that at all.
Whenever you do module design like this, how do you balance giving enough breadcrumbs for a story plot line, but not going too far into that railroad nature. How do you sort of balance those two?
That can be tough at times, because when you write, an adventure, a lot of times you're writing these for a 4-hour time slot. Now, the 4-hour time slot may turn into 3 sessions for you because your players decide to focus on one thing, and then you may have to go build something else just for this single adventure, because characters and players are going to be characters and players. They're going to maybe take it off the rails, which is all right. But I try and to design it and leave enough information for the DM to kind of say, okay, well, I know this, so this is what's going to happen, or this is what I can build off that. But yeah, I've got some railroad adventures out there, like Blood on the Trail, which is you get this quest, you follow the crumbs, and you end this quest. The basics. It's great for a first-time DM because it just runs them right through it. First-time players, there's not a whole lot of decision making. It's just do this and do this. But then there's others that do include a lot of decision making. And as a writer, I want to provide something the DMs can use or GMs can use, and I want to provide an almost railroad adventure because that's what they're buying. So, and the easiest way to do that is put it in a location. So put it in a building. Adventurers go in the building, they finish the adventure, they come out of the building. All right. That's not necessarily a railroad because they may not hit all the rooms in the building, but they've done the adventure. Or put it in a cave or something like that. When you start telling them that they've got to travel from here to here, and then they see a shiny thing over to the right, it's like, well, let's go check out shiny thing. Well, you've just lost what was supposed to happen for that session. So, yeah, easiest way is to put it in a specific location and let the adventure happen in that location.
So, as you're designing these encounters, and sort of following the story beats that you're wanting to incorporate, how do you make sure to sprinkle in enough encounters for that experience, for them to, level up or whatever sort of the goal is at the end?
Sure. A lot of times you can just milestone it. Say at the end of this adventure, the characters go up 1 level or something like that. There's not necessarily a need to... because it's not Adventurers League. Now, if you're Adventurers League writing, then you have to calculate all that stuff. But if it's just a third-party adventure or campaign, just set milestones, because splitting XP between everyone is sometimes a hassle, and who gets this XP for doing this cool thing, and who doesn't get this XP for not doing this, and just milestone it. That's the easiest way.
I'm so glad you say that, because as a GM, so I run multiple games throughout the week. I'm very fortunate to have quite a few players, and that's exactly what I do. And as a GM, that's what I prefer to do, because it makes logical sense. I don't have to make sure that they fight some random monster in some random room that doesn't even make sense, or they're never going to find the backstory for it.
Exactly.
I like that. So I love milestone leveling.
Yeah, it's just, if you've got a team of 5th level players who are on the verge of going to 6th level, run them through a one-shot, level them up at the end.
Yeah.
Because you might feel that they're not quite ready for the next part of your campaign because they're still at 5th level, but you don't feel that they've done enough to make it to 6th level. So yeah, that's when you just throw some stuff at them and give them a side quest or something like that.
I love side quests.
Plus,
they can be... Go ahead.
Well, plus, as like I said, an older person who has a full-time job and writes and loves to game, it's easier for me not to track my experience points. Just tell me when I level up.
Yes.
And I will hound you until I level up. Am I 6th level yet? Am I 6th level yet? Do we level up yet? We level up yet? At the end of every gaming session, that's ours. Yeah.
No, as a GM that does milestone leveling, that every time I say, "Well, that's it for tonight," and all my players go, "Well, did we level?"
Yep.
So that was a very triggering statement you just put in there. So I want to backtrack quite a bit when we first kind of started talking, you mentioned incorporating the names of like Metallica songs and stuff into your adventures.
Sure.
How do you incorporate not just musical references, but actual music into your table?
Well, for there is one adventure that I haven't written yet, and I've thought about doing it. But there was this traveling group of halfling bards that were called they were called Metallica. So it's Meta META dash Leica LIKA. So Metallica. And they were actual halfling bards, and so they had these guitars or lutes and stuff that looked like the black bass guitars and that kind of thing. We cast Thunderwave from them and do all this stuff. One was the shirtless lead singer who could do like the charm spells and vicious mockery and all that kind of stuff. And they were led. This was the master of puppets was leading them basically, but they had a dragonborn manager that traveled with them. So the dragonborn manager, I'm going to make sure. Okay. I was thinking about the original question before I got too far off topic here.
It's fair.
The dragonborn manager would go around from town to town and talk, and they would go to these fairs, and Metallica would come out. And so when they were coming out in their wagon, it was a covered wagon, and you hear just like Sword of Straw, or some of the other Metallica songs as it's coming out, and then the curtain drops on the wagon, and you just hear the music higher, and you see these little metal bars going, yeah, whipping their hair around and stuff. So, yeah, that's how I really incorporated music into that adventure. Also, with my Song of the Nightingale trilogy, Scourge of the Nightingale trilogy, each one is a song of war, a song of love, and a song of revenge. I commissioned someone to do actually a musical score that somebody could use on a piano or a guitar or something like that to sing a song in each one. Each song in the adventures ties to the adventure title and the theme of each adventure too. A song of war, a song of revenge, and a song of love.
I love musical references in anything. So to see how you've sort of incorporated that into your games is really awesome.
Yeah, the big Metallica fan. I love Primus. Jane's Addiction, all those. But Metallica's just got so many good references. Like I said, Master of Puppets, Unforgiven, the thing that should not be, I think, is one of them. So yeah, just so many cool ideas.
So Shadow Tool wants to expand a little bit on this. At the table, do you use music or any audio like Serenescape?
I don't. I haven't done that. Now my DM Casey Bax, he will do that. He'll have something going on in the background, or he'll use like tavern sounds or something from his laptop going. But yeah, he'll drop in some music occasionally. When I did the Metallica adventure, I actually stood up and did I was just role playing it myself. But no, I have not brought in music to the game yet.
Is that something you'd be interested in doing at any time, or
one of these days? Yeah, if I actually wrote that adventure, I think I could probably make references to play this song now, or this is a song they've heard of.
So for a game that I was actually a player for once in, the GM found it very distracting to have music going on in the background, but released a playlist. So there were 3 chapters. It wasn't a one-shot, but it was kind of a shorter scenario. And for each chapter, he released like 1 or 2 songs. Mm-hmm. And so it was a playlist that you could listen to on your own time. But then during play, again, he just found it too distracting. Yeah. So I find it interesting.
Music can be very inspiring, especially for me. I get a lot of inspiration from gameplay, from images, and from music. A lot of times when I write, I'll listen to Thomas Newman soundtracks in the background. So like you're talking like the soundtrack for American Beauty, Pay It Forward, Road to Perdition, The Help. Just I like Thomas Newman. He's got a percussive background, and you can hear that within his music. So yeah, a lot of musical soundtracks will inspire me while I'm writing too, because you get those high points, where the drums are banging and you just start typing a little faster. You're like, oh.
Yes, I definitely know about that. For somebody who has just so many ideas, how do you go about sort of editing yourself and like editing your ideas down into sort of a workable adventure?
Yeah, that can be tough sometimes. Like I said, I've got a list of 11 things I've started, and I really want to get those finished because I've got a lot of stories to tell. And it's like, well, I keep coming up with ideas and I keep adding to the list. So, as Jeff Stevens Games LLC, my drive is to build my company. And so a lot of times I have to think, well, what's going to be a successful product that's going to generate secondary income or residual income for a long period of time? So that's where Kickstarter comes in. You have to think about those larger books that are going to be available on Amazon, Virtual Tabletops, Drive-Thru RPG, and maybe hopefully eventually in retail stores if I can figure out how to get the physical books published and then shipped and distributed by other distributors, which is a daunting task. But and then there's the love projects that I have, like just some of the shorter adventures, especially the ones I've worked on with Brimley Farr. And there's a project I'm working on with my brother that we've been working on for about a year and a half that always kind of gets set aside because something else pops up. And I'm trying not to come up with too many new projects. And I recently put a tweet on Twitter that said, I have so many ideas, I'm at the point where I need to hire writers to write my ideas. Because sometimes some of these I really want to put my own writing into, but some I think are really good ideas that I think other writers could do maybe better than I could write it, because I know my limitations.
Yeah. So how do you find, because you've talked a couple of different projects of working with other authors, how do you find that collaborative writing process to work?
So far it's worked pretty darn well. Like with Brimley Farr. Yeah, because I try not to write with too many writers at once. If I do, it's going to be a larger collaboration, like some of the Builds and Layers projects where I asked for this, they turn it in, it's mine, and then I'll edit and do what I want. A lot of times I don't go back and forth with a writer. I'll accept their first work. Sometimes there may be some revisions that I say, okay, this isn't going to work. Can we do this instead? Oh yeah, go ahead and make that change. But most of your freelance writers are like, okay, I did the work, I've turned it in, it's yours now, do what you need to do with it. It may never get published. I may turn something into somebody and they never publish it because it didn't fit what they necessarily needed at the end of the project. But with Rimley, I can, and some other writers that I've worked with, I can say, okay, I need this. And if you can do that, then I can write a story around that. And so it's worked really well so far. As long as you are clear in what you want,
right?
Give them a word count, give them a deadline, tell them what they're going to make in payments, and deadlines are the biggest thing. And I give some leeway if somebody has something come up. I understand. I've had the same thing, and I'm not on a hard set deadline to get things done because I'm publishing on my own products. So it's like whenever we get this out, it's good. But yeah, communication is the biggest thing between freelancers or contract writers and the production manager for the piece. If you are running late or something, tell the manager of the project. Say, hey, something came up, I need a week more. Just don't not turn something in, or don't leave that person hanging wondering what's going on. And do not return their emails.
Yeah.
Keep the communication going.
As somebody who works in project management, in my day job, big same. Please do not ignore my emails.
Yeah, communication is the biggest thing.
Yeah. We have a question from Shadow Tool. With so many memorable NPCs from your stuff over the years, what is your favorite and from what product? They really like making you pick a favorite child.
They do. I don't know. Glib is really a fun one. I think Shadow Tool experienced Glib yesterday in an adventure that we ran through. That is a bullywug who acts as their guide through cave system.
What is a bullywug?
It's a frog person.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, they're usually not very friendly, but this one was. Man, that's just so hard. There's Susie, I believe, in Annalise's Happy Jack's Funhouse, a small child NPC who got away from Happy Jack and was wandering the funhouse, and she, Susie. Her name, I think, is spelled S-U-Z-A-Y, so it looks like Suze, but she always corrects people as, no, it's Susie. You know, if somebody were to read her name tag. I don't know, just little things like that. It's just really hard to pick a favorite NPC.
How do you approach NPC design?
I like to give the DM or GM enough information to where they can run that NPC. If I don't have a picture for them, I will give a description of what they're wearing, of how they may act, what they've done in the past. You know, I try and keep it brief enough to where, okay, I can highlight sections of this and know how this NPC is going to work. There's always the possibility of writing too much backstory for an NPC and for an adventure itself. Try and keep it simple,
Right.
just enough to let the GM know what to do with the NPC. But NPC writing is some of my favorite writing.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yep.
I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about your podcast.
Okay.
How do you go about sort of developing your content? So your podcast is Jeff Talks RPGs,
Mm-hmm.
and I was actually watching some of it on YouTube, which I thought was kind of fun that you had it's a podcast, but you had your videos on.
Yep. It's a live
kind of...
It's a live Twitch stream that we convert into a podcast because
Mm-hmm.
some people may not have the time to watch the video, so I want people to be able to listen to the information as well. And so I've wanted my podcast or my show to kind of look at the things that players are wanting and GMs are wanting, tabletop industry topics, design ideas, less on review of material, less on actual play, more on the backside of the tabletop industry. Discussions between creators, discussions between companies, just that type of thing. Something that the creators and possibly players may be interested in listening to. And I had some really cool guests on. I think I had Ed Greenwood on talk about world building, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. What's your favorite episode so far? Now I'm making you pick a favorite.
I think Ed Greenwood. He was so fun to talk to. Yeah. Yeah.
World building is really kind of a cool discussion. And I don't know, that I have to agree with you. That one was really...
Yeah, it really wasn't much of a world building discussion as much as it was just like an interview of Ed Greenwood. We just are talking about stuff, and then, okay, well, Ed, how did you? And I think I asked Ed, like, what's your favorite part of the realms? He's like, well, that's same thing. Ask him, like, who's their favorite kid? It's like, I love all of them much, and kind of how did you design the realms? Like, well, we did this, and then I knew they had to go here, so I kind of developed that area. And it's a fun discussion. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. When you have a specific guest on, what do you do to sort of prepare for it?
I will I try and keep the discussions open. So I'll write up some lead questions, and then from there we'll just kind of branch off that question. And if they say something, well, okay, well, tell me more about that. But a lot of it has to do with, because I try and come up with a theme for the show. I have one coming up on the 21st that's going to talk about high-level adventure design. So we're talking, tier 4, 15 to 20. That I'm speaking with so far on the panel. I have Tony Winslow Brill, Greg Marks, and Anthony Joyce, who have all written high-level adventures. So just kind of a discussion on that. So I'll come up with a list and kind of say, okay, I'd like to talk about these subjects, but we're not limited to these. We can just kind of keep it open and branch out and discuss as we go. Because I don't want to, keep them set to a certain discussion or
right.
Set of questions. I kind of like to build off of the interaction between everybody.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. Shadow Tool had a question. What is the Twitch channel we can catch your stuff on? I know about the podcast, but not Twitch.
Yeah, actually, Jenny Loveday is my podcast streaming producer, and so it's on her channel. Let me find that real quick. I think it's Jenny Loveday TV. Is that what it is? There it is. So it's twitch.tv/Jenny Loveday. GINNYLOVEDAY.
Awesome. I'll have my engineer put a link to that in the chat for those of you guys who are interested, because honestly, when I was kind of preparing for this conversation, I went in and was watching some clips from your podcast and your interviews. I found them really engaging. And I think you do a really, really good job. So,
well, thank you. Yeah. Again,
as somebody who, go ahead.
Again, it's about trying to keep it real between the discussions, and a lot of times discussions can reach a point where there's things that you may not want to talk about. Where I try not to let that happen to me. I try and be as open as possible with people. The whole discussion about where to publish. You should always publish on Drive-Thru RPG because you keep more money out of that and you can publish it anywhere else. Versus, well, if you're just starting out, Dungeon Masters Guild to me is probably where you need to start out, because you're having more people look at your title. It's going to be it could be picked up in bundles for D&D content. A lot of different discussions with that. Where to start publishing.
Well, and I think it's really important to have those conversations, because other people can be, I wouldn't say cagey, but just reluctant to talk about it, because it's hard. It's hard to break into this industry as a writer. And so looking at the success that you've had and then trying to sort of replicate it, any advice you can give is great. So no, I really, really found your discussions to be helpful and candid.
Yeah, I really want to try and do that. There's some discussions that are on Twitter that can get heated about, freelance writing rates. Anything under 10 cents a word is ridiculous. Every writer should earn on 10 cents a word or higher. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense for a lot of creators who are wanting to work on projects. And if you're published on the DMs Guild and you're making 50 cents a month off your sales, somebody comes back to you and says, I'll pay you 5 cents a word to write this, plus maybe a short commission. You just made more money than you're going to make on any other product on the Dungeon Masters Guild so far. So it's not like I'm trying to take advantage of someone. It's just when you're producing for the Dungeon Masters Guild, it's like you're losing 50% off the bat. Okay, so it makes it more difficult to make that money back if you're looking at the logistical side of it. So I'm open. I don't care what people write for. If they want to write for 3 cents a word, do it. You're not taking anything away from me. There's so much work out there. Well, I say there's so much work. There could be so much work if people were to do more collaborations like that and pay people to write. And then, you could use that $30 to buy a piece of art for your project that you didn't have before. You could use the $50, depending on what you're making off of, the writing or the additional royalties. But my number one suggestion would be to produce, create, publish, produce, create. Keep making products. You know, your
Right.
first one may not sell well. Just keep going. Learn from your mistakes. Learn from your comments and your reviews. Just keep making products.
Has there ever been a review of one of your products that just kept you going or kept you being like, I'm gonna make this work?
Yeah, I've had some really good reviews, especially on the Night of the Rise. I just received another one last night that said my players had such a blast. So I won't give any more away with that review, but that kind of thing. When I see Twitter people say, "Hey, just finishing up this by at J. Corbin Stevens," I'm like, "Yes, that's what I want to hear. I want to know people are enjoying my adventures. That's better than a sale, you know. I want to hear praise for something that we've written and worked hard and put money into to produce. I want to hear that." But some comments, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Some comments and reviews can be very, I don't want to say single-minded. It can be just the way the adventure ran for that person, that DM and their party. It just didn't work out, and so you get a bad review of that, or because you didn't say, give a little more backstory about a certain NPC. My job is not to provide you with everything you need for the adventure, or your campaign. It's to provide you enough to run the adventure the way it's supposed to be ran. I can't be responsible for what your characters do or what they ask you during the adventure. Can't always anticipate that. So take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt. If you see that happening more and more, you may want to consider adding a little more backstory or focusing on correcting what they're commenting about. Learn from your mistakes and your reviews. Do not get mad at people when they leave a bad one.
We've talked a lot about like Twitter and sort of the interactions that you have on there. How do you sort of take that feedback from social media and the interactions that you have there, and either let it inspire you, or do you more like departmentalize that and say, okay, that's separate from my actual writing?
That's a hard question. It can inspire you to write more,
Yeah.
So when you see somebody is enjoying your product, that is, like I said, it's better than a sale, because a sale means somebody bought it. They may never run it. They may never read it. It's just they bought it and they
right.
It just gets stuck in their library of PDFs. But if somebody actually runs it and makes a note of that and calls out that, hey, this was great, you should check it out. That's great, because that makes me feel good. That lets me know that somebody ran something I wrote, they enjoyed it, and they are probably going to look at more things that I've written, which inspires me to create more. So if you are a producer, a consumer of third-party RPG products, leave reviews, leave comments, leave star ratings on their product pages, because that means the world to us.
Great advice. Well, we are absolutely at time today. We will be talking to Jeff again later today as part of our writers panel at 2 p.m. Central Time, and again at our podcasters panel at 4 p.m. Central Time, right here on this channel. Otherwise, Jeff, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you, Beth. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has. And we will see you all later today. Bye.
Bye.